Hello. Unfortunately, during our Sunday morning service today here at in the parish of Bushy, my internet connection cut out halfway through the sermon. So I thought I'd record it again now so that those who are interested can listen to the whole sermon, including the ending. Our reading is from the second chapter of the book of Exodus. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. "This must be one of the Hebrews' children," she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women and to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she took him as her son. She named him Moses, because, she said, "I drew him out of the water." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, today is Mothering Sunday. It's a day to recognise and celebrate mothers and the ways in which they richly bless children and those in their care. It's also a day to give thanks for mother figures, those special people who have helped us to grow and develop in our lives. One of the gifts that a mother can give to a child is time spent reading stories. Can you take a moment to think back to some of your earliest memories and recall some of those stories that you enjoyed being read to you? Well, when we were live, I asked those who were listening to put in the Facebook and YouTube comments their favourite stories, and they were displayed on screen. And we had lots and lots of classic children's books spanning generations. And it was really lovely to see that there were some similar ones that came up there, and just to be able to share those special memories with our congregation. Maybe you've got a favourite book that you're thinking of right now. For me, one of my favourite books were the Spot the Dog books. And I think that the big colourful images and large printed text, I just found them really enjoyable as a child. And when I think back to it, I can imagine being snuggled up into the arms of someone who cares for me and looks after me. Of course, this isn't always a biological mother. Anyone who takes time to support a child in this way is participating in the mothering of that child. I'm always impressed to hear of people who give up their time to go into primary schools and read one-to-one with children in that context. There's something special about reading a story together. The child whose view of the world is in the long process of formation is able to share in the imagination and delight of a story with someone who provides a protective, motherly presence. This presence, whether from a mother, a father, a grandparent, a family friend, a school teacher. This presence is so often unnoticed and taken for granted, yet it's crucial to a child's long-term spiritual and emotional life. The stories themselves help children to learn how to navigate their way in the big wide world. They offer a mother's wisdom and insight into the many dimensions of life. Well, that's the case with our story from the Old Testament this morning. At one level, we have a classic tale of threat from a murderous king, risk as the future hero is taken to safety, and his adoption into a royal family. Moses floating along the reeds of the Nile in a papyrus basket is one of the famous images from the Bible. In this short passage, we've got danger, bravery, sacrifice, and salvation. When we look a little closer, we notice that the story is also teaching us something important about motherhood. In particular, the lead characters are all women: Moses' mother, his sister Miriam, and Pharaoh's daughter. Each of these women play an important role, and together they tell us something both about human motherhood and also about the motherhood we find in God. Firstly, in Moses' mother, we find the protective nature of motherhood, which takes risks and stands up to unjust authority. The context of this story is the mad king, Pharaoh, so fearful of the Hebrew people rising up and threatening his power that he orders the drowning of all baby boys. Pharaoh's insecurity, envy, and rage provide a stark contrast to the mother's care, sacrifice, and love. She hides her son for 3 months, risking her own life. When she realizes she cannot hold him anymore, she creates a protective ark for him, a kind of womb, if you like, and releases the child onto the great river Nile. This is a picture of God's protective care of us. In many places in Scripture, God is called upon as a shield or a mighty fortress. We often hear these as masculine images, but they equally well convey the mothering instinct to protect and shield the young from danger. And it's important to bring God into the picture because, of course, there are limits to what mothers can do for their children. Those who have experience of caring for others know how difficult it is. They know the self-doubt and anxiety that gets mixed up with the positive desire to nurture and protect. Moses' mother reached the limit of what she was able to provide for her son, and in order to save the life of her child, she had to let him go and entrust him into God's providential care. She must surely have experienced the words spoken to Mary in our Gospel reading this morning. A sword will pierce your own soul too. Moses' mother is an example to us all of releasing things that are most precious to us into God's hands. Secondly, we turn to Miriam. Here is someone who participates in the task of motherhood. She follows the basket as it floats down the Nile and boldly steps into the scene with Pharaoh's daughter to help reunite mother and child. Miriam is showing us that mothers need to be supported by the community around them. It may be this morning that God is putting into your mind a specific person that could use some support and help from you. Maybe you know a new mother who has recently given birth, and you could provide some practical help with meals and deliveries. Maybe you know someone who's recently had to say goodbye to their children, who would value some friendship and support. Or perhaps you know someone who's experiencing the pain of childlessness, who would love to have children but cannot, who just needs a listening ear. Miriam shows for us the role that we all can play in the community that helps nurture and protect others. Finally, we consider Pharaoh's daughter. Here is the mothering instinct which crosses cultural and social boundaries. Pharaoh's daughter was wealthy, elite, and Egyptian. Moses' family were poor, slaves, and Hebrew. But Pharaoh's daughter recognizes Moses' helplessness. She takes pity on him. The cultural and social boundaries disappear as she welcomes a tiny baby into her household. There are many children in our country and around the world who do not have a motherly presence in their lives. In the UK, around 40,000 children and young people come into the care system every year. Through fostering and adoption, people show the care and compassion of Pharaoh's daughter by welcoming young people into their homes at a critical point in their lives. It may be that you'd like to think a bit more about this theme, and I'd recommend 2 charities to investigate. The first is Home for Good, which encourages fostering by Christians. And the second is the Children's Society. On their website, they've got lots of practical ways of supporting young people in difficult circumstances. Ultimately, Pharaoh's daughter is echoing the heart of God, which is concerned for vulnerable children. Psalm 68 describes God in this way: a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. Later in the story in Exodus, God takes responsibility for the whole Israelite people, as Moses leads them through the sea and through the desert towards the promised land. The New Testament picks up on this theme as it describes Christians as adopted sons and daughters of God. Some of us have had good relationships with our mothers, and others will have had more painful experiences. As we considered earlier, there are limits to what even the most dedicated mothers can provide for their children. Together, we're being encouraged to see the ways in which God's loving care for us is a kind of maternal love, as we embrace our identity as adopted sons and daughters of God. We began by considering some of the stories we enjoy having read to us as a child, and thank you for sharing those with us. One way of thinking about Scripture is seeing it as a story of God's love. It's a story that's meant to give us hope and inspire us. Today, on Mother's Day, our reading from Exodus is such a story. It reminds us of the importance of mothers and the community that shares in their important task. It's a testimony to the maternal instinct which mirrors the very heart of God. So the next time you find yourself reading Scripture, maybe imagine yourself as sitting in God's loving arms, his warm embrace, as he reads his story of love to you.